Pizarro. Whoops, what's that first step? Good morning, Doctor. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or you affirm that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated. State your name and spell your name for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Dr. Greg, G-R-E-G. Middle initial is B as in boy. Last name is spelled P as in Peter, I, Z as in zebra, A-R-R-O.
Thank you. And doctor, can you tell us your profession, please?
I am a forensic pathologist who performs autopsies mainly in Mendocino County with occasional coverage in Napa, Sonoma, Marin. Previously, I performed autopsies in San Joaquin County. I was also a former assistant medical examiner for the city and county of San Francisco and did previous work in Kern County and Bakersfield.
All right, and call you doctor because you're a medical doctor. Can you tell the jury a little bit of your background, training, and experience as it relates to, I know you said you were a forensic pathologist, but talk to the jury about your medical school training, experience, and all that as it relates to being a forensic pathologist.
Okay. My medical school was in the University of Santo, and I'll spell that, Tomas, S-A-N-T-O. Second word is T-O-M-A-S, Manila, Philippines. Did a pathology residency at Shadyside, Shady Inside is one word, which is affiliated with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Did a first fellowship in soft tissue pathology at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, went into private practice, which also included 6 years working in a skin clinic doing dermatopathology. Decided needed more of a change, went into forensic pathology at the Tarrant, and I'll spell that T-A-R-R-A-N-T, County Medical Examiner's Office in Fort Worth, Texas. Then went into forensic pathology practice in Kern County, San Francisco, San Joaquin. I did work in a company called Forensic Medical Group, which covered Colusa, Sutter, Yolo counties, before taking my almost current job at regional pathology and autopsy services, which is based in San Leandro, California, doing mainly Mendocino and with coverage in Napa and Sonoma and Marin counties and San Joaquin. Unfortunately, last week they announced that they're going out of business, and now I'm setting up like a private professional corporation to do mainly Mendocino County and also to cover other forensic pathologists in Napa, Marin, and Sonoma counties.
All right. Thank you, doctor. If you wouldn't mind, tell the jury about forensic pathology. What that's a science in a specific area of medical practice.
Forensic there's two types. When you do autopsies, there are two types of pathology. If you're employed by a hospital and you do an autopsy, they call you like a surgical general pathologist. You do autopsies in the hospital. Usually you have medical records that you literally know it's a natural cause of death. You just do, if the next of kin wants to know the cause of death, or if there's he dies unexpectedly, you could do that. A forensic pathologist, usually we work in coroner's or medical examiner's office. The morgue is usually can be a funeral home, or some counties here in California, they have dedicated medical examiner's office that in case of unexplained natural death or a homicide or a suicide or automobile accident, any type of accidents, we are the ones that perform the autopsy. Or in some cases, if we know a lot of the history, we can do an external examination and we can determine the cause of death. So there's a difference between a hospital general surgical pathologist and a forensic pathologist.
All right, doctor, and now I know you've explained, I think, pretty well, but I'm going to actually ask you to define for the jury what is actually an autopsy.
An autopsy is generally you examine the entire body. First thing is when we receive the body, we look at, we describe the body from head to toe. We look for, let's say, areas of injuries, for example, bruises, fractures. We also want to identify the body in some certain way. For example, if there's presence of scars, tattoos that can identify the body, we make we take the height, we take the weight, we get all the descriptions available that we do, and then we get some blood, vitreous humor from the eye, urine, some we do bile, piece of liver. We do this for toxicology studies. So let's say if there's a drug overdose, you have the specimens available that you can test for the presence of illegal drugs or alcohol or any substances that, or prescription drugs that were there, like that. So after you do get all those specimens, and if I can stand, you make usually for an autopsy, you make a Y incision you start from here, down there, all the way down.
Indicating from the shoulders
to the chest,
middle chest,
all the way down to the above the pelvis, above the genital area. You open the organs. You see if there's any rib fractures, any abnormalities in the abdomen, anything that will. And you have to document by taking pictures, so that will help you prepare your report. And you could also make a schematic diagram, like you have a silhouette of a person. You make your you make a rough drawing of what you see in your like that. So that also helps you in writing up your report. So after you open the body, you can open up the ribs by using a lopper, like you could use like what you do, pruning shears. You can open up the rib cage so you can expose the heart, lungs, and the neck and some of the neck organs that you can't see. You take off all the organs out. You weigh them. You section them. If you find anything unusual, you can take. You save some of these specimens for. Like we put it in a preservative called formalin, so you preserve the body. So just in case, if you have to come back, if you see, let's say, in unexplained death, if there's the examination did not turn out anything, the toxicology is negative, at least you have the specimens to take histology specimens, so you can look at them through a microscope, and then you can determine more if you have the cause of death. And then we also would cut here and then use a special saw that will open up the skull to expose the brain. You take out the brain, you weigh it, you can also section it and do the same way. So after you do all of that, then you start to formulate your report. You try to determine, we just do the findings. We see what we see in the, if there are, let's say if it's a natural death, if there was blockage of the coronary arteries, or if there was a ruptured myocardial fracture, we make the description, we say the cause of death, and in this case, in Mendocino County, it's up to the coroner to determine the manner of death.
All right, and thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I'll mention a little bit the mode or manner of death. In this particular case is going to be your job. That's what those 4 modes or manners. The doctor will testify as to cause of death, but that's part of the job that is going to be yours during the course of this. Now, doctor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go individually through each one of these members that you performed an autopsy, and then at the end I'm also going to talk about a couple about court order that in fact a person is deceased. So what I'd like to do is start with Jennifer Hart.
Okay.
And ask you, did you perform an autopsy on the body of Jennifer Hart?
Yes, I did.
And doctor, just a couple preliminary matters. Can you tell us when did you perform that autopsy?
The autopsy for Jennifer Hart was done on March 29th of 2018 at 10:20 in the morning or 10:20 hours in military time.
All right. And normally what I would ask in an inquest is if you could determine the time of death, and I'm assuming that your answer in this case is going to be no. Is that correct?
No.
And just describe for the jury, I don't want to make any pejorative statements about NCIS or any television shows, but it's often, I want the doctor to explain that often very difficult to determine when a death actually occurred, and if the doctor could just very briefly opine as to that, in particularly in a case such as this.
Okay, the cause of death on her was multiple blunt force injuries due to, I ruled it as multiple blunt force injuries, especially neck and right chest, due to motor vehicle plunge off the cliff with rollover, from what I gathered from the reports. And she had a significant amount of ethanol at 0.102 grams percent in the blood and 0.104% grams percent in the vitreous humor.
All right. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but what I'd like you to do is just let the jury know why you can't determine a time of death in a situation such as this. Not specifically as to this person, just in general, so that the jury understands.
All right. I did put in a time of death of seconds because the main cause of her death that I ruled it in seconds is called mainly an atlanto-occipital dislocation, which is the shearing force of the crash kind of dislocates the skull and the first cervical vertebra, which is called the atlas. So that's where you get the atlanto-occipital, which is the skull dislocation. Usually in 70%, they're usually fatal, and it's usually due most often to high-speed accidents, especially if you head-on or side collisions or sometimes rollover collisions. You could any force that shears off the skull and the first cervical vertebra that also can, it's kind of called an internal decapitation, because you, in many cases, you sever also the brainstem and the spinal cord.
All right. Now, with respect to Jennifer Hart in your autopsy, and you performed the regular, we call it external examination, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Any significant findings on your external examination as to Jennifer?
There were a lot of multiple cutaneous traumatic injuries, like lacerations, and then there was abrasions. There were contusions. She, especially on the side of the face, was a lot of deep lacerations. And then surprisingly, they didn't have any other than the rib fractures, but no, like say, broken bones, broken pelvis. There was none of that.
All right.
Okay.
And then your external examination is where you examined and saw that occipital issue that you spoke about, which ultimately caused her death.
That is, yeah, usually if it's a very loose, if it's very unstable, yes, it could be palpated in a way, but you confirm that when after you've taken out the neck and the brain during the autopsy.
All right. So you confirmed by doing that, in fact,
Yeah.
the cause of death that you've indicated. And if you wouldn't mind repeating for the jury, so it's in this case, her cause of death was.
Cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries, especially neck and right chest. And then I put in parenthesis second because since it's due to that atlanto-occipital dislocation, usually, as I said, 70%, it's usually fatal. So it's almost instant. And then the cause is due to motor vehicle plunge off the cliff with a rollover. And then in parentheses, she was the driver of the vehicle. And then another parenthesis also in seconds. And then other significant conditions is ethanol present. I mean, I will leave that to like the law enforcement with regards to if she was legally
Well, I'll ask you the
intoxicated,
question. So it's, yes, I appreciate that we will. What I simply want from you is that as part of the vitreous fluid, the blood, the things that you take urine, as part of a normal toxicology study, in fact, the results came back, fair to say, that you've just mentioned that there was ethanol present in her system. Is that right?
That's correct.
And ethanol is scientific term for
Alcohol.
And at the toxicology level that you've indicated, 0.10, is that correct?
0.102 grams percent.
All right. So for those of us who are familiar with what the laws are in the state of California, 0.08, fair to say that 0.10 is beyond the legal limit for someone operating a motor vehicle.
That's correct.
All right. Let me ask, with respect to, now I mentioned, you said due to motor vehicle rollover. So prior to performing an autopsy, then you gather as much information about a particular incident as you can. Is that correct? So that you get some history of what happened to this particular person.
That's correct.
All right. So you had gotten that information prior to performing the autopsy.
That's correct.
And in this case, did you understand that the body of Jennifer had fallen out of a vehicle onto some rocks?
Yes, I did get information that when she was extricated, she fell another further 100 feet. I did get some information on that.
All right. And that is fair to say that some of the injuries that you noted on her exterior could very well have come from falling.
Yes.
But very difficult for you as a pathologist to determine which was from the rocks and which was...
It would be very difficult to determine which came from the accident itself or from the time that she was, at the time she was extricated and fell.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. A question that I do have for you with respect to the body of Jennifer Hart is, you have a history of, as a pathologist, I'm assuming multiple investigations and autopsies involving people that were in motor vehicle collisions. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And can you often see injuries related to seat belts on those individuals that you've autopsied in the past?
You will find, like, in seatbelt injuries, like an abrasion that would go like this, crossing over.
So you're going
something
from,
like here, or if it's a passenger from this side here.
So the doctor is indicating from a driver, it would be from the left
Here,
side.
from the left shoulder to the left hip. Sometimes
A lap?
you may have a lap belt injury here, if like that around the hip area. You will have it.
All right. And then you were saying from a passenger, you might
Side,
have
you
it
have it from the right shoulder
side.
down to the left hip.
I see. So my question to you is, and you may or may not be able to answer it in this particular case, did you see any evidence of a shoulder lap belt injury on the body of Jennifer Hart?
From my recollection, I didn't see any seatbelt injuries, but I can check.
And while you're checking, is that something that you would normally look for in a body that had been in a motor vehicle collision?
Yeah, you would see, like, if she, you can easily determine if she was belted by looking for that, like a seatbelt impression, yeah. Because that is the only thing that will arrest your progression from the seat to, like, to the dashboard, the windshield, and the steering column. Yeah, the seatbelt will arrest your acceleration or the force that you would move towards that, towards the windshield and the dashboard. Mm-hmm. Because when you, from your physics or from your science, if you follow Newton's third law of motion, when you hit a vehicle like that, the force is coming from the object and it goes towards you. So you have an equal and Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the force is going towards you. So the tendency for you is to move forward instead of backward. But if you're in a rear end, of course you're going to go, because the force is going towards you like that, you tend to fly back like that.
I see. So in this particular case, from what you knew prior to doing the autopsy, that would be somebody as part of your protocol, you would look for that kind of injury. But it appears
partly you would look for the injury and also look at all the other injuries, because it's especially there will be some stretching injuries, let's say, because you're kind of thrown forward, and then the skin will stretch on some, especially around the hip area.
All right. And then, if you wouldn't mind, because I've looked through your report, I'm not here to testify, I would like you to review your report and see if, in fact, you noted in any, on Jennifer Hart, any injury that you would put in your report as being a result of a lap belt or a seat belt injury.
See, one abrasion on the right lateral shoulder. It's mostly contusion. Okay. Oh, I stand corrected. Here's large area of diagonal abrasions covering a surface area measuring 14 by 12 inches from the left breast extending to the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. She was belted. That makes sense here. Mm-hmm. 14 by 12 from here all the way down. Yeah, that's it here. Large area of diagonal abrasions covering a surface area from the left breast extending to the right lower quadrant of the abdomen.
And doctor, that would indicate is that a conclusive that in your view, or is that's where?
It's likely she was belted, yes.
I see. And you say likely.
Yes, it's very likely. Mm-hmm.
All right. What, is there anything else you'd like to add then related to Jennifer Hart and her autopsy?
Let me see. Other than she had hemoperitoneum, which is blood in the peritoneal cavity, about 100 milliliters. She had lung lacerations on both right upper, right lower lobes. Liver lacerations, so a lot of injuries are from the right side. That's about.
But the ultimate cause of death was
the ultimate cause was the atlanto-occipital dislocation.
I see. All right, doctor. Let's move along to Sarah Hart. I'll ask the same question. Did you, in fact, perform an autopsy on the body of Sarah Hart?
Yes.
And what was the date of that autopsy?
That was also March 29th, because it took me 2 days to get through all 5 cases.
All right. And with respect to that autopsy, can you tell us your significant findings on external exam? And I say significant findings if they're injuries that that are significant that go to perhaps cause of death or?
Okay. Essentially, her cause of death is also, it was an atlanto-occipital dislocation with traumatic asphyxia, in parenthesis, second. And then due to, she was pinned between the seats and the roof. And then due to a motor vehicle rollover over the cliff.
I see. All right. And well, the same question with respect to her. In reviewing your autopsy report, do you have evidence that in fact she was, evidence one way or another, whether she was belted or unbelted?
From all the injuries, it does not appear that she was belted. No.
All right.
So mostly are small, most of the cutaneous injuries are, majority of them are pretty small. So it's from there, it's unlikely that she was belted.
All right.
The largest is a contusion on the anterior right thigh. That's the biggest injury.
External injury.
External injury, yes.
All right. All right. And so you've indicated a very similar major injury as you've testified with respect to Jennifer as to the cause of death at occipital, yeah. I see. And your toxicology studies, I could see that, in fact, you gathered the various fluids and blood for sending off to the toxicology lab, and I see the result. Can you testify as to what the significant toxicology findings were? The
significant toxicology for Sarah was a diphenhydramine, which is known as Benadryl. Her level is 2,100 nanograms per milliliters, which in conversion is 2.1 milligrams per liter.
And can you tell the jury, I suppose in layman's terms, what that means?
Okay. It went through here. Her level of Benadryl is pretty high, like a toxic level from one of my references books is 1 to 5 milligrams per liter, and her level was 2.1. So she means that she had diphenhydramine toxicity, but that is not the reason that killed her. Because you could, in many cases, like with regards to ethanol, with methamphetamine, you could have really sky-high levels of these drugs, and you'd still be walking, and you'd still be alive. So this was a diphenhydramine toxicity, but she still may have not, that did not kill her.
What I would like you to do, however, if you can, let the jury know, so this is diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, in order to get to that level, which you considered a toxic level, not whether it killed her or not, but Benadryl is something, sometimes people sleep, is that not correct? Can
That's correct.
Say what are some of the symptoms? And if, more importantly, if you can tell the jury approximately how many standard doses of Benadryl would it get for somebody to reach that level that you've spoken of?
I can't say how much Benadryl to produce, like you'd have to take a significant amount of Benadryl to have an overdose.
Well, the term is this, would you consider this an overdose? And I understand you've already said it certainly wouldn't have killed her, but
it's, in essence, it is an overdose, but it's not to the point that it like a lethal dose would be from, as for a lethal dose is from 5 to 39 milligrams per liter. So that's the lethal dose for a thing of Benadryl. And because Benadryl comes in, if I remember, 25 milligrams per capsule.
I guess to kind of help the jury, and I think where this is something is of interest, particularly in this case, is that I appreciate it's not a lethal dose.
Right.
But I do appreciate it appears that it's well beyond the recommended therapeutic dose. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's fair to say. All right. Fair to say that Benadryl, I have some familiarity. I'm not an expert in this case, but most history that I'm understanding, having children, all that, if you give somebody one Benadryl, it helps them sleep at night. And that's one dose of Benadryl. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And coming back to, I think if I remember, it comes in a 25 milligram and a 50 milligram capsules like that, and then they come in creams. It can be I believe it can be injected. But your over-the-counter is 25 and 50 milligrams of capsules of Benadryl, if I recall.
So however it was ingested, whether it was dissolved or pills or however, in Sarah Hart there was, fair to say, well beyond the therapeutic dose of Benadryl in her system at the time of autopsy.
That's correct.
All right. And it has a depressive effect, is that correct?
Yes, it does.
All right.
You can have, like, for adverse effects is dry mouth, sedation, pupil dilation, increased heart rate. There's also urinary retention. Overdose, you have like, you can have hallucinations, heart palpitations, drowsiness, seizure disorders, and tremors. And lethal doses, you die from cardiovascular collapse.
I see. Well, I'll ask one final question. I think it's fair to say that Benadryl is a drug that is often, when taken, there's a warning that says do not drive or operate heavy equipment. Is Benadryl or
Yeah, that's correct.
diphenhydramine?
Any sedative, you don't drive or operate heavy equipment. That's correct.
All right. All right. Thank you, Doctor. You know, we've got several more to do, and I'm going to apologize to you that we're going to take our lunch break now.
Okay.
Have you back after lunch. I want to let the jury know we're still absolutely on track. As I say, I think we're even a little ahead of time. I anticipate we'll finish up with the doctor early from the time we get back at 1:30, and then we'll move right into I believe Deputy Beck from Washington, and we're right on track, just to let you. Please remember that admonition, that don't talk about the case among yourselves or anyone. I have no idea where somebody might eat and will it, so I can't make any recommendations when we go off the record. I'm sure you can chat with somebody, or many of you probably know. So we are off.